I just did a consulting job with a company that had 18,000 members. It was an association. And they wanted to do something for their members. And so I said, well, the best place to start is by making your disaster planning and kits a good example. And there were 4 people on the phone with me, and there was dead silence. And I said, you do have an emergency kit, right? And there was one lady piped up and she goes, well, there was a lady here a few years ago that put something together. It's probably in the box in the storage room where we took everything out of her desk. And it turned out that they did find it. It was 11 years previous. Not a single person that was in that association was, when that was written, was there anymore. And nobody even knew where the first aid kit except the risk management person, because it was underneath her desk. So starting with your business continuity plan and incorporating all the emergency, in the course, I have a list of questions of what you need to ask yourself, so you know what kind of plans you need to have. You need to have a communications plan. You need to have an evacuation plan. You need to have a kid plan if you have kids. You need to have a parent plan if you have parents. If you have special needs people in your house, you need to have that. You need to have for your business, you need to have a data plan, a communications plan, a crisis management plan. I mean, the list is, I think there's about 10 different plans you should have for your business. And here's a very scary statistic. So FEMA has done research, and they show that if you do not have a emergency plan as a business, at the end of 2 years, if you experience a disaster, 75% of those businesses are no longer in business. So that is a very good reason to put a plan together.
You are listening to the Millionacres Podcast. Our mission at Millionacres is to educate and empower investors to make great decisions and achieve real estate investing success. We provide regular content and perspective for everyone from those just starting out to seasoned pros with decades of experience. At Millionacres, we work every day to help you demystify real estate investing and build real wealth. Hello, I'm Deidre Woollard, an editor at Millionacres. Thank you so much for tuning into the Millionacres Podcast. Today, I'm thinking about how to plan for the unexpected. Because if there was anything else that 2020 taught us, it's things can change on a dime. So this is, in my opinion, much more than just COVID-19. We've seen wildfires, floods. We have vaccines for the virus, hopefully, but what we don't have is a plan for an increasingly unsettled planet. So that's why I'm really excited to talk to Coni Meyers today. I've known Coni for a few years, and I've been excited this year by her work with the California Association of Realtors on disaster planning. She's a life coach, and she's worked with people on their personal transitions for years, but now she's got these disaster plans for people on how to recover from disasters, how to respond to them, how to prepare for them. She's a former FEMA inspector, and she's creating a certification program for disaster specialists, which is, I think, something that we kind of really need right now. So, hi, Coni. I'm happy to be talking to you today. So, I've been following your work on disaster preparedness, and I think a lot of real estate investors just don't think about this. Why do you think that is?
I think it's, first of all, thank you for having me, but I really believe it's because people don't want to think about disasters. It's kind of like people don't want to think about wills because they have to think about dying. And if you have to think about being prepared and really thinking about disasters, all of a sudden you have to really face the fact that it could happen. And a recent study found that 61% of Americans believe that they are going to experience some kind of a disaster in the next 3 to 5 years. And only 15 to 35% of them are actually prepared. So that shows you that there's actually a big disconnect into what they feel is going to happen and what they really need to do about it. FEMA actually calls it procrastination, preparedness procrastination.
That makes a lot of sense. So I noticed in your program, you've broken it down into 4 components. And can you share that with our listeners?
Absolutely. So the certification has 4 separate courses. The first one is called Be the Good News in the Face of Bad News. And it's really an overview and a very sobering idea of really what's happening as far as the cost of natural disasters, as well as what the frequency is and the intensity. It also goes into preparedness, how to be prepared, as well as disaster type preparedness, because a fire, you prepare a little differently than you do from an earthquake. And then the third is all about, or the fourth course rather, is all about recovery, who the services are available out there and what they do. The second course is survival, mindset, leadership, and communication. Um, People that are first responders and people that have been victims will tell you the most important thing you can do is to have a resilient mindset. Resilience is used a lot in the emergency management, whether it's dealing with infrastructure, communities, businesses, or individuals. And as an individual or as a business owner or a property investor, you need to understand the mindset of resilience. I also go into leadership. You might you might have a great property management company, but you might not be the right person to handle your crisis knowledge or your crisis management team. And then communication is everything. So as an investor, communicating with your tenants, communicating with the agencies, the news media, all that, you got to have a strong plan for that. The third course is all about man-made disasters. It's called Disasters of Our Own Making, and it talks about pandemics. It talks about mass shootings. It talks about nuclear explosions. It talks about bomb explosions. It talks about power outages. And all those things that we can cause ourselves. And then the fourth course is all about it's the role of recovery, managing insurance, mortgages, and recovery services. And it dives deep into insurance, what you need to know, what the insurance company is facing. There's some real reality checks when it comes to insurance right now. There's people out there actually predicting that property may become uninsurable at some point if something doesn't turn around. Mortgages, it's all about what happens when there's a disaster. Like the pandemic is a perfect example. We've got forbearances out there now. We've got property investors that are having to hold on because they can't uh, get rid of anybody. So there's lots of factors that come into play with mortgages. And then the recovery services. There's so many services out there over and above FEMA. There's faith-based as well as nonprofits. So we cover all of that.
Interesting. So, why do you feel that the certification program is important kind of right now versus any other time in history?
Well, because of 2020, I mean, we've had disasters, not including the pandemic, but far above that. We've had what they call derecho winds in the Midwest that were sideways winds that did a lot of damage in like 5 or 6 states. There was 6 weeks in a row we had a new type of disaster. 6 weeks in a row. Um, we had double hurricanes in the Gulf. We had there was hurricane force winds throughout the southeast, but there wasn't a hurricane. This spawned like 100 different tornadoes around the area. The whole western United States was on fire, and they had things called fire nados, which are actually tornadoes that are made out of fire. And then the Gulf of Maine has the dubious honor of having the temperature of the water rise more than any other body of water on the planet. And just recently, a piece of Antarctica broke off into the iceberg that's the size of Manhattan. So it boils down to money and the number of disasters and the intensity of it. And we all have to be prepared. We all have to be ready. And like I said, only 15 to 35%, depending on what type of preparedness you're talking about, are prepared. And my vision is to have 30 million people be more prepared in the next 5 years. In order to do that, I need lots of people helping me go out to the communities and help the communities become prepared.
That is a great mission. So, this podcast is for real estate investors. I feel like real estate investors have kind of a double role here because they have to protect a property, but they also have to protect tenants. You know, whether they're a short-term investor or whether they have long-term rental tenants, commercial, all of that. So, it's really this kind of double role. How do you advise property investors on how to do that?
Well, the first and most important thing is to do a risk assessment. Take a look at all the types of disasters that can happen or the crises that can happen and determine what in your area are you most at risk. And then deciding what you can do to mitigate as much of that ahead of time as possible. So checking with your emergency management office, they can give you some great information about the types of disasters that happen most frequently in that area. Checking with your insurance and then making sure that you understand and read all the fine print of the insurance policies because you need to understand what your limits are, what kind of additional insurance you might need, and be able to really understand based upon the type of risk that you are looking at what you're covered for and what you're not covered for. And then there's other agencies you can reach out to FEMA and lots of local other agencies, depending upon what the type of disaster is we're talking about. And then make sure you create an annual checklist of things to look at every single year. And make sure that you share the information, your plans and everything with your tenants. It might be a good idea to put together a Facebook where you update if there is a disaster. You can update them on what's happening. So it really starts though with basic risk risk assessment and making sure that you know exactly what you're looking at. And that's before you buy a property as well as if you already have a property.
Well, that is a really good point about before you buy a property. And that brings me to my next question, which is one of the things this year I've learned is just that the wildfire and floodplain maps are kind of inaccurate in terms of predicting what's going to happen. I know the floodplain maps used to say, like, this is a 100-year flood zone, and that is completely not the case anymore. So, do you think that's a situation that's going to get better? I mean, we've seen some technology trying to predict where wildfires are going to go, for example, and but then we've got, like you said, the fire nados. Do you feel like technology is going to help solve this?
Well, what technology is doing is it's helping to have more private insurers come into the flood insurance market, which is good for taxpayers. But the situation in the insurance, I just mentioned that I would never get depressed if I didn't get depressed writing the man-made disasters course. But in reality, when I was writing the insurance course, it was terrifying. I'm a girl that has her glass half full all the time, and I had a hard time finding anything. There are actually people in the insurance business that look at how rating that all works, and the actuaries. And there are some of them that are saying if things don't change, property is going to become uninsurable. And it's very scary that what's happening in the insurance business. Well, and like in California, well, throughout the country now, insurance companies are pulling out. It's really, really important that we really take a look at what's causing this and then see what we can do to correct the problem. But it's also really important that the insurance companies um, they have to do something to be able to make insurance affordable, because in some places rates have gone up 500%, and some of them they've actually pulled out completely. So the floodplain information is really critical, and FEMA started last year on working on the floodplain maps. And there's lots of different organizations, and I do think technology will help when it comes to like the fire, uh, deciding where the fire hazards are going to be and what to do about it. But it really is going to boil down to we all have to play our part in doing everything we can. Disasters, the cost of disasters, let me just give you a quick statistic. From 1980 to 2019, the average cost with inflation adjusted was $44 billion a year. Now, if you look at the last 5 years, from 2014 to 2019, the cost of insurance of disasters went up to $106 billion per year. If you look at the last 3 years, it went from 106 to $152 billion per year, and that doesn't include 2020. So whether you're talking insurance or natural disasters or the monies that are going to be made available through FEMA or whatever the source is, it really boils down to the fact that we have got to take this information and do something seriously and do it quickly.
Yeah, it's a lot. And I know you talked about insurance. I've heard in California they have that program for people that eventually can't get reinsured in certain areas. And that also Yes, exactly, the FAIR program. And that makes me also wonder about insurance. Do you think that the insurance industry itself is going to have to shift? Obviously, they can't continue to keep paying this out. You mentioned the National Flood Insurance Program. We've got some supports from the government. Do you think we're going to need to see more of that to support people, or are the insurance companies going to find a way to get better at this? Are they going to have to raise their rates?
Well, I think it's actually a combination of all of it, Deidre. I think the insurance companies are really looking, and they're actually looking at what they can do to help change the greenhouse gases. They're very involved in that. They've got new technology that they're coming out with to try and support that. I do believe that it's not going to get better. I mean, people think the end of 2020 is close and 2021 is going to be different. I hate to tell you, but I don't think that's going to happen. So we have to look at the long-term effects. And the one good thing, the FAIR program is backed by taxpayers. And so the taxpayers have played a huge role, and more people have had to go to the FAIR program because other insurance companies have pulled out or they can't afford it. So think about that. And the pandemic is a good example of this. So if you have a problem with large losses through the FAIR program. And you also have problems with mortgages, which are also backed by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which are also taxpayer dollars. That creates a really double situation for the financial situation of this country. So all of that needs to be looked at, and it's going to take a joint effort of being able to, between the government agencies and insurance agencies and businesses, to come together and try to solve some of these really grave issues. Technology is going to help because the number of people getting into the FAIR program as well as the flood insurance program that are private insurers has gone up dramatically over the last few years, and that's because of technology. They were better able to forecast. The other situation is, and there's discussion right now about it, is that insurance companies are not allowed to come up with a price based upon future risk. And that's what we're looking at right now. We're looking at what the future risk is going to be because it's grown so dramatically. So now they're looking at how they can help insurance companies. And some states are looking at, okay, well, how do we allow for the potential risk rather than what's already happened?
Interesting. And that makes me think also about rebuilding. So a lot of times we've seen this already in California when, a fire happens and it destroys an area, people tend to just rebuild in the same place. And I think that insurance companies are probably going to be looking at whether or not they, just pay out and have someone rebuild in the same place if there's a risk of it happening again.
Well, that's a very interesting situation. And it happens a lot also in the South where there's hurricanes where people try to rebuild. If you have experience, and I don't remember if it's one or two, I think if it's two disasters where you've received FEMA money and you want to build back in the same place, it's at your own expense. You don't get FEMA money again. And I'm sure insurance companies are looking at how they can create barriers, and that's going to reduce the value of people's properties. If they have a large property that's out in the woods, and all of a sudden the insurance company says we're not going to insure this area, that's going to change the value of your property. So I do believe that there's going to be some real strong shifts in where you're allowed to rebuild, just like floods. So with the new flood plans, if you are at high risk, you have to carry flood insurance, but there's also areas where you cannot build or that property is taken away from you. So, I mean, and something I want to mention about that. So if you're in a low risk or a medium risk area, 25% of the claims, FEMA claims, are in those areas. So if you don't carry flood insurance, you should look at it, even if you're at low and high or medium risk. I actually did disaster inspections on mountains that was for flooding. So, yeah, I mean, you just never know when it's going to happen. 98% of all counties in the United States experience flooding, and it's getting worse. So flood is a big problem, whether you're an investor or whether you're thinking about your own private home.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I know in Houston, I think the government has bought back some of the properties because they were in floodplain areas. Certainly think about Florida. I know in some areas, they're not even doing 30-year mortgages in some places just because the sea level is going to rise to a certain point. So all of that really kind of plays into just how big a problem this is going to be in the future.
Well, and I think especially when it comes to investors, that is something that they definitely need to look at. I know that a lot of real estate agents that do a lot of property in California and Florida and all the coastlines, they're being asked now, okay, so what is the risk of my house if the water rises? And it is rising. The bottom line, it is rising. So it's going to affect values, but that is certainly something that if I was an investor, I would be checking that out very carefully. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration actually has a map where you can go on and you can click different areas and you can see what the sea level, how much it's risen in that area. What I find interesting is in different areas it raises a different amount. I'm not quite sure how that works, but you can go on there and actually check out for the particular areas that you're looking for what the forecast is.
Awesome. That's a really good piece of advice. Great. So that is a great place for us to take a little break. During our break today, we are excited to have Millionacres lead investment analyst Matt Argersinger here to speak briefly about one of our newest services, Real Estate Winners. Thank you for joining us, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
So what is Real Estate Winners and who is it for?
Well, I like to think of Real Estate Winners as our answer to Stock Advisor in the real estate market. It is a service that provides recommendations on publicly traded real estate investment trusts and real estate companies. So it's a pretty big universe out there. There's over 200 REITs to choose from, and probably dozens, if not hundreds, of real estate companies that are in our universe. And we provide regular investment recommendations as well as commentary on the market, educational material. And it's really designed to get anyone who's interested in investing and learning about real estate started.
So is it geared toward new investors or is it more for seasoned pros?
I think real estate winners can serve both. I think if you're a new investor, maybe you're just getting started with stocks and you want to learn more about how to add real estate to your portfolio, great place to start. If you're a seasoned investor and just thinking, okay, how can I diversify my portfolio, maybe reduce the volatility in my portfolio, maybe add some income to my portfolio, then I think Real Estate Winners is a great solution for that cohort as well.
Fantastic. What are the benefits of being a member of Real Estate Winners?
Well, I think the number one benefit is from day one when you join, you get our top 10 investment ideas at the moment. So really right from the beginning, you know what our 10 best ideas in the publicly traded real estate market are. And then going forward on a monthly basis, you'll get a new recommendation, sometimes more than one new recommendation, as well as regular content that we're coming out. We're covering our past recommendations, providing updates on, and talking about the real estate market. So it's really the full package if you're interested in real estate investing.
Perfect. So what do you need to get started?
Really, all you need is a discount brokerage account. So if you're used to buying stocks, and you probably already have that. If you haven't bought stocks in the past, of course, just open a discount brokerage account. These days, you don't even have to pay commissions. It's fantastic. So it really couldn't be easier to get started investing with Real Estate Winners.
Sounds fantastic. So how can people sign up?
Sure. They can head over to real.fool.com. That's real.fool.com.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt. We are here with Coni Meyers of CKM Solutions Group, and we are talking disaster planning. So one of the things I learned, I lived in California for a long time, and I learned that you had to prepare for different types of disasters. So for earthquakes, you had to have bottled water and food. For wildfires, you have to have a go bag and know where all of your documents are. So what do you advise people in terms of preparing for their for this type of thing? Did you give them kind of multiple plans like that, depending on what the situation is?
Yes, in my certification, I have I list I have an emergency checklist that you can go through, and the bottom line is you don't need just one emergency kit. You need 4. You need one for your home. You need a go bag. So your main disaster kit is like a big duffel bag, or maybe 2 duffel bags that you put everything in that's on your checklist. But you also, if you need to be rescued, you can't take those with you. So you need a go bag that you can grab and just go, that has absolute bare minimum essentials, things like medication, extra cell phone batteries, that sort of thing. Toothbrush would be good. And then you need one for your car. So, and that might be different depending upon where you live. So you need one for your car, and then you need to have one for your place of business. And if your investors have like a property management company, or they have an office that they've got people in it, each individual in that company should have their own specific emergency kit at work that has medication or anything that's specific to what their needs are. And then for the office, you need to have an emergency kit. And bottom line is, everybody needs to know where it is. I just did a consulting job with a company that had 18,000 members. It was an association. And they wanted to do something for their members. And so I said, well, the best place to start is by making your disaster planning and kits a good example. And there were 4 people on the phone with me, and there was dead silence. And I said, you do have an emergency kit, right? And there was one lady piped up, and she goes, well, there was a lady here a few years ago that put something together. It's probably in the box in the storage room where we took everything out of her desk. And it turned out that they did find it. It was 11 years previous. Not a single person that was in that association was, when that was written, was there anymore. And nobody even knew where the first aid kit, except the risk management person, because it was underneath her desk. So starting with your business continuity plan and incorporating all the emergency, in the course, I have a list of questions of what you need to ask yourself, so you know what kind of plans you need to have. You need to have a communications plan. You need to have an evacuation plan. You need to have a kid plan if you have kids. You need to have a parent plan if you have parents. If you have special needs people in your house, you need to have that. You need to have for your business, you need to have a data plan, a communications plan, a crisis management plan. I mean, the list is, I think there's about 10 different plans you should have for your business. And here's a very scary statistic. So FEMA has done research and they show that if you do not have a emergency plan as a business, at the end of 2 years, if you experience a disaster, 75% of those businesses are no longer in business. So that is a very good reason to put a plan together.
Yeah, that is a really good reason. And I think that's really important for rental property investors. They've got this valuable piece of property, they've got so much invested in it, and yet they may not have a plan to protect it.
And for investors, for real estate investors, they need two plans. They need one for their office and what they're going to do, but they also need a tenant plan. And there's a whole list of things they can put into that tenant plan that's part of the information that the tenants receive when they start doing the rental.
I think that is a really good plan. And I've rented plenty of places and I've never received anything like that. So I think that's something that a lot of rental property investors don't think about. And that really makes me think again about Airbnbs, because with Airbnbs, not only they're in vacation places where things might happen, but there's also maybe some man-made disasters that could be caused by tenants, things like fires and things, like that. So for those short-term rentals, how do you prevent against those kind of things, or how do you make sure short-term renters are prepared?
Well, I was actually an Airbnb person for 8 years. I had 3,000 people come through my home during that period of time. So I can really relate to an Airbnb host. I think the most important thing is making sure, first of all, when you are pre-qualifying the people that are coming into your home, I always made sure I knew a little bit about them. If they didn't have anything in their profile or anything, I would ask questions. So I think first of all, being good at planning who you're. Don't just take everybody. And then when they do have, if they're renting out the entire property, like I just rented out rooms, but if they're renting out the entire property, make sure you have a good security deposit that will help them to be a little more conscientious about what they're doing, and make sure that they know where the fire extinguisher is, and the fire alarms, and give them a safety list to help prevent that sort of thing. The good news, if you are an Airbnb person, you do have Airbnb does cover you for $1 million for each stay, so you do have backup. I had to use it one time, so I have some personal experience with that as well. It was not a pleasant experience. So and that's where I learned, really screen the people that you want to have come and stay in your home, if they're a guest in your home or in your rental.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk a little bit more about FEMA, because you were a FEMA inspector for all those years, and I think a lot of one of the things that I think people don't understand FEMA, they also don't understand what to do when something does happen. My mother-in-law was in the Paradise fires and lost her property. Yeah, so I one of the things I kind of saw her and her partner going through is that they just did not know. They kind of didn't know where to turn. So, what do you tell people about that sort of recovery process? Like, how does that even start?
Well, I think it's important. Um, and this is where people that want to be leaders in the community, like, for example, if some of your investors want to really be a part of the community, this is something you could really, it'd be really good to take the certification, because people need to know who they can turn to. From the real estate agents that take my course, they are going to be a trusted source that will be able to help and be able to reach out to their community to give them information. So that's what this certification is all about. I actually provide a consumer course that can be customized for the area that the person that becomes a CCAM advisor is in, so they can go out to their community and help prepare them. So, but the biggest and most important thing is you'll be given information by the local authorities. There's also a program called the CERT program, a Community Emergency Response Teams. It was started in 1985 by the Los Angeles Fire Department. It now is under the FEMA guidelines and is nationwide. We have 600,000 volunteers in 2,700 communities. So get involved with that so that you can help to let people know what to do. It's a hands-on training. It's free. It's 17 and a half hours, and it does such things as light search and rescue, um, first aid, resuscitation, team organization, those kinds of things. And so if you are so inclined that you want to be a participant in your community, I highly recommend you do those things. To find out where to go, the main thing, you just have to go to FEMA.gov, and it has how to reach out to them. They have a special number. They have a special website called Disaster Assistance I think it's .org. It's either .org or .gov, where you go and you make your initial application with FEMA. That's usually where you start. And then there's all kinds of other assistance that is available that they a lot of times will recommend you to. The American Red Cross and the Salvation Army are also really good sources of what kind of information is available or what kind of assistance might be out there. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have some special programs when there's a disaster. There's also a program, I think it's under the VA, the headings of the VA. It's a rural, so if you're in a rural area like Paradise was, there are special programs that kick in when there's a federally declared disaster just for rural areas. So there's lots and lots of resources. The last section of the last course, I talk about a lot of nonprofits, and they all have specific purposes for what they're trying to do. And they've all gone from, what's interesting is they've all gone from one or two people with an idea, and now they're global. So you'll start hearing about going to your church, because what the nonprofits do is they reach out to churches. There's also a lot of faith-based organizations. But the first place you need to go is disasterassistance.gov, I believe it is, and go there, and that's where you make your initial application. They typically set up field offices where you can go, and that's where all of the people that have recovery services will kind of come to. They'll go to the shelters and set up and let you know what's available. So, but the first place to start is disasterassistance.gov.
Yeah, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. So what happens if you're a rental property investor and it's a property that you're not near? So let's say you had a property in Florida, but you're actually based in New York and there's a hurricane or a flood. What kind of things do those types of investors need to keep in mind, and how can you manage a recovery remotely? Is that even possible?
Well, if at all possible, I would, as an investor, I would want to go there and be there. If a disaster happens, to assess it myself and get face to face with the people that I need to get face to face with, depending on what type of disaster it is. I don't know. I don't know that if you can't go, somebody in your organization go and kind of oversee the steps. When it comes to preparedness, now that's a little different. You can do that remotely. You can have somebody that goes out, and you can reach out to the emergency management office and the FEMA office and that sort of thing in your area to determine what kind of risk you have and then what to do about it. So that can be done remotely as long as you have good property management people or somebody in the area that can oversee what's happening. Because without having hands-on, you're not going to know exactly what is needed and what's going on. And unfortunately, if there is a disaster, there are a lot of contractors and a lot of scam artists that come out of the woodwork. So you need to really be conscious of, if it isn't you going to the disaster, then sending somebody that you can trust to get the job done. If you have a property management company in the local area, and you trust them, but I would make sure I stayed in close contact with them. You want to reach out to the tenants. That's why maybe a Facebook page or something like that, where you're getting interaction with your tenants, is critically important. And then having somebody that goes door to door to really assess what's happened with each of the tenants is also a really good idea. And there are some really good property management software programs out there that have built-in email and messaging systems. But it really boils down to communication, having a strong communication crisis management team. And so picking the people that are going to be best. So who's the best leader? It's somebody that's really detail oriented, that is a good project manager, can motivate people. It comes back to mindset. All of that. So it can be done remotely, but I would, if it was my investment property, if it wasn't me going there, it would be somebody that I highly trust.
That's very important. You mentioned scams. I think that's another important thing to touch on here because I've seen that happen with disasters. It's sort of, and it's like a double whammy to people that these people come out, kind of, like you said, come out of the woodwork to, basically to cheat people who are already in distress. Have you seen anything like that, or heard any stories? And what do you recommend that people kind of do to protect themselves?
Well, I unfortunately I have seen it. So you go out, you do it as a FEMA inspector, you go out and you're not trying to make people whole. So if you've got a 65-inch TV, you're not going to get a 65-inch TV. FEMA is all about safe, secure, and sanitary. And that means a spoon, a fork, and knife for each member of the household, or, a table and chairs for everybody in the house, those sorts of things. But when those people or even before they get the FEMA check, they've got people knocking on their doors that have come from all over the country to offer their services. And so when they get the check, quite frequently what they will do is just say, okay, here's the money. And they'll pay the entire amount up front. And the person just takes off with the money. So making sure that you do not do that. When you make sure that you look for quality. And if you don't know quality contractors that you need to have to do the work, then make sure you get referrals from people that you trust and that you know are going to do the job correctly. And when people come and it sounds like it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. So being very conscious of who you're talking to, and if you don't know somebody, finding a friend or somebody that you do know that you trust to help you and guide you, getting somebody that's qualified. And check out the credentials. Make sure you ask for their licenses, because many of these people that come into these areas, they don't have licenses. So make sure they have their license, that they're an up straight contractor.
Yeah, that's very important. So as we wrap up, you mentioned earlier researching a property. So what other things can you do to kind of protect yourself about researching natural disasters or the history of a property to find out maybe what has happened beforehand? What are some good resources there?
Well, first of all, there's through FEMA, there's all kinds of information on what to look for. I think really the most important thing is to go to your local agencies, go to your local insurance companies, and find out from them what the history has been. You can go on to FEMA.gov, and they have a history of all natural disasters. You can go back whatever year you want to look at, and you can see how many disasters were in that particular area. So you doing your research online. There's a website called Ready.gov, which is the public website for FEMA. Well, for all types of disasters, but primarily FEMA. And they have all kinds of forms and things. You go on there, and there's toolkits and things you can pull up to be able to help plan that out. Also, I think it's really important. Check with your real estate agent. If you have a professional real estate agent in the area, check with them and find out what they know. And don't forget man-made disasters. Don't forget, because there's power outages, there's active shooters, there's pandemics, there's chemical incidents, there's explosions, there's all these things. And so if you're in a community that, say, for example, has a refinery, when was the last time that refinery exploded, or has it? And what was the effect? Would that affect the property? So being aware of what is in the surrounding community and knowing what hazard might happen, it takes research. It takes talking to people. A lot of time on the internet, or talking to somebody that really knows what they're doing, like a CKM advisor.
Awesome. So, as we wrap up, one of the things I've learned from you in this hour, I think, is just how you have to prepare. But the thing is, no one wants to talk about this. No one wants to do this. So, how would you incentivize property investors to think about this? Do they need to set aside time at the beginning of every year, or make it a New Year's resolution? Or how do people get motivated to do this?
Well, that boils down to mindset. I mean, when you see on TV after there's a disaster, you see two types of people. You see the one that is the victim. Oh my God, what am I going to do? My house is gone. Everything's gone. What am I going to do? And then you have the other person that says, we have our lives. We can rebuild. And it takes that resilient mindset to help move forward in preparation. So what is the first step you can take with where you are and what you have right now? And then, yes, annual planning is critical. If you don't want to do it yourself, you can reach out to somebody like me or somebody else that has that expertise that'll help to get you going. I have a complete business continuity plan outline that I help people make those first steps, because it is hard. We don't want to think about it. But once you take that first step, then the second step shows up. So try to chop it up, not into, oh my God, I have to do this great big plan, but take one itsy bitsy baby step at a time. And the first step might be figuring out, how do I get myself into a resilient mindset? And then what is the first step I can take with where I am and what I have? So it really boils down to mindset and being able to take that first step.
Really good point. And I think a lot of us have the fear, but not the action. And I think putting some of that action in place kind of takes away some of that fear.
Actually, there's an acronym that is used by emergency management people. It's called STOP. And the S stands for stop. So before you do anything, just stop everything you're doing, let your mind go, and then take 3 or 4 really deep breaths. So you bring yourself to the present moment. That's take a breath. So T. Then observe. Observe what's going on inside of you, and then observe what it is that you want to, what is it you want to do. If it's a particular building, imagine the building and imagine where it is and what it is. Observe that building. And then P for proceed. Proceed with a plan. And emergency management people use it all the time. Before they go into a disaster, first responders use it. Before they go into a fire, they all take that second to know what to do. And here's a really good example. So last year when I was at the Reimagine, I did a forum for the Professional Development and Education Committee. And I had a FEMA person. I had this person from CERT, a victim and an association executive from Santa Barbara from the fires and the floods, or the mud flows. The fire chief, who was the CERT man, he's with the head of the CERT program in Los Angeles, and he lives in Woodland Hills. He said that he was in Woodland Hills when the fires were coming into his neighborhood. Now, here's a trained first responder that heads up the CERT program. And he said, I had to stop because I was going into panic mode because it was headed to my house. And so he had to stop and do this before he could proceed. And then that natural reaction of being prepared and being trained. You can't just be prepared, but you have to drill and you have to drill and you have to drill. And so putting all that together, just remember, stop. And that will help you to take that very first step.
I love that. That's a perfect place to end this. Just a reminder for listeners, you can discover Coni's Crisis Knowledge Management certification at ckmsolutionsgroup.com. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure. The more I can get it out, the better I like it.
Thank you for tuning in to the Millionacres Podcast. I hope you liked today's show. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing through your favorite podcast provider. And if you have any questions, please feel free to drop us a line at help@millionacres.com. Stay well and stay invested. People on this program may have an interest in the deals, offerings, or services they discuss, and Millionacres or the Motley Fool may have a formal recommendation for or against. Always consult a certified tax professional before acting on tax advice, and do not buy or sell assets based solely on what you hear.